What's good, everybody? This is Adam Indra Dandar here with our first episode of Behind the Avatar. I am very lucky to be joined by Jaycie. She has a really cool story, in my opinion. I love the fact that she started with YouTube and is a content creator, so really grassroots, and then has worked her way up in multiple different avenues and different businesses. And now she has landed working with a small consulting group called Gaming Group. And you are a brand manager currently for Gaming Group. Welcome, Jaycie.
Thank you. I'm a brand manager for Wisdom.
Oh,
It was
Wisdom.
Wisdom
I say the
Gaming Group.
Gaming Group. I'm sorry.
Yeah, don't worry about it. It's just Wisdom now. It was Wisdom Gaming Group.
Right.
That small business, you change stuff around. Um, and yeah, it's kind of encompasses a lot of different things. But what I do right now is we've got content coordinators who develop and think of cool ideas for content in the scenes where they're kind of a part of, and they're uh, bringing us information about, and I help them take those ideas and make them into cool YouTube series or Twitch shows.
Oh, interesting. I love that. We have at our company, we're really thinking about how to engage specifically millennials, and everyone's
Mm.
talking about, getting into YouTube, getting into Twitch,
Yeah.
getting into all those places to do that.
Hmm.
So I love that there's people out there who really get that and can really help connect the businesses to that. I'm
Yeah.
not really that guy, but I'm glad there are people who do that. So I'm looking forward to learn more about that. Before we get to that, though, I kind of want to start at your beginning. I love that
Sure.
on your LinkedIn, one of the about me, you talked about starting off as a YouTuber. What does that
Hmm.
mean to you?
So, um, it's interesting because I think being a YouTuber really requires you to have so many skills or develop skills really fast. So I have the benefit of being majoring in mass media and especially in film editing in college.
Mm,
So I kind of already had the benefit of knowing how to edit videos. Um, but it's you when you're starting out, you're kind of a one man show where you're filming, whether it's you're making content like this with a webcam, or you've got a camera set up like I was doing, where I was trying to make shows about StarCraft fan art. I also eventually was hired as a host and editor of a show all about weekly news about MMORPGs.
mm.
So it really does require you to pick up a lot of different skills. Being like your on-camera skills, your editing skills, social media skills. A lot of people don't recognize like right off the bat. Those things really help you, and a lot of it is really just trying to use whatever online tutorials you can find to develop those skills as you go.
I feel like I am the worst marketer in the world. I hate doing self promotion, and
Yeah.
so it really is a skill that, like, if you could teach people how to do that, I feel like you can make $1 million easy,
Yeah, I almost feel like too it's just it would be like a really good basic skill to teach people now, kind of like
especially today.
programming. Yeah, because everybody's social media is I think looked at when people are being looked at for even for jobs, for hiring.
Yeah.
That's looked at, and there's so much that you can do with a really professional looking social media presence, but that really isn't talked about, or even I can't even imagine like growing up with the social media as it is now, but just making sure that your bad social media habits from being a kid don't come back to haunt you. I think it really is increasingly an important skill to have good self marketing.
Yeah, and the thing that's really interesting that I think about that, and I would love to hear your take because of your expertise, is there's this idea of, like, promoting the brand that you're developing, but
Hmm.
then there's also this idea of promoting yourself on social media, and kind of the differentiation between your brand and yourself.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I think I would say the biggest separation you would see for me would have been when I was commentating, um, because every commentator has a brand, you would say, right? Persona is what we call it.
Yeah.
Um, And it's not that it's not you, but it definitely is like not the whole picture. And I think you can say this the same for streamers.
Mm.
Probably, yeah, streamers, content creators, YouTube content creators. You are accentuating those entertaining aspects of your personality that people love. For me, it's being really bubbly and excited and dancing behind a commentary desk during Kira's the Storm drafts. Like that was me. But sometimes people would meet me like at cons, and they would be like, "Oh, you seem really tired," when really I'm just an introvert in real life. So at events, I'm a little more like listening and um, kind of even keeled and not bouncing all over the walls like people expect. So when it comes to social media in that, I think it's like you're always trying to find a balance. For example, there's been a lot of really difficult like people bringing and talking about the difficult experiences they've had in gaming lately. And
Yeah.
you people have to talk, like think about, like this is maybe not something normally that I would touch on as the politically correct and like not even politically correct, but just not politically involved really persona that you have when you're like working for a company, like a big company, like even Blizzard when I was casting.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a might be a topic, an issue that I'm really passionate on, like being a woman in the gaming scene.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I myself, Jaycie, would want to speak on. So, I think those are the kinds of things that maybe people don't realize that people who are um, in the space have to deal with when looking at their persona versus who they really are.
So when you were, I guess, like on the up and coming, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
how do you find yourself balancing that? Did you strike a balance? Did you find yourself doing one more than the other? How was that process for you?
I think I aired way more on the persona side than
Okay.
I would now. Now it's pretty much me, I would say.
Okay.
Um, but uh, working for a really big company as a commentator, I think especially once I was starting to do events for Blizzard as a commentator, I really wanted to just like not, mess that up, because you're everything is when you're a commentator, and especially when you're up and coming, every event feels like it could be your last if you really mess up.
Mm.
So it's very scary, and so you really just don't want to mess anything like that up. So I aired pretty heavily on trying to make sure that I was always brand friendly on all of my social media.
Yeah. I don't know how it was for you when I did a couple events and when I started getting very early on into some of the online events where I started, everything was volunteer basis. And so
Mhm.
I don't know if that was your experience or were you able to get some gigs that helped financially pretty early on?
Hmm. Trying to think about that. I think I was pretty lucky in that I was able to find some stuff fairly early on, but there was a solid, uh, maybe like 5 or 6 months where I commentated for free.
Mm-hmm.
It was just commentating a community tournament in order to learn how to commentate and be able to have, like a platform of good games to commentate on besides just my own replays.
Yeah.
I think that is generally what ends up happening for a lot of people trying to get into esports work. I was just talking about this with a friend earlier, but I think, people writing, that's definitely one place where they start and often have to do stuff for free.
Mm.
Administration, like TO work, is another one where people are like so invested in wanting to find a job in the esports scene that they will do work for free. It's kind of one of those unfortunate unwritten rules, sometimes even written. Sometimes I see people saying, like, if you want to get into esports, you just have to do stuff for free. I don't think that that is good. That's not a great thing, but I think it
Yeah.
is unfortunately kind of where we're at.
Yeah, so I wasn't planning on talking about like the state of esports much. I did want to highlight, you and what you did. If
Sure.
you're okay, I'd like to ask some follow up questions about the state of esports and kind of how that is.
Sure.
I found it really interesting that that was my experience too, and that it was expected that some
Hmm.
free stuff was going to happen. But I've never really got to a good point where I could say I feel like this is a solution to it.
Hmm.
I always use the example of golf. I don't know if you follow golf at all. I do
Nope.
not. But the one thing that's really interesting, if you ever look at golf payouts, their payouts are like hundreds deep. And so I found that very interesting where esports maybe top four, especially when we're talking like 10 years ago. It was
Hmm.
like top one, top two are getting paid. I think it's starting to get a little deeper as far as like
Yeah.
teams. And so then when I think about that, it's like, how does a team afford to pay people when you're like the 12th best team? So you're not really making any money.
Yeah. Um, I, there's a lot of weirdness, I think, when it comes to pay, in esports because there's absolutely still existing the notion that sometimes you just have to start for free and go, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate that. My company hates that. We don't want anybody to work for free. So, we might be able to pay a ton, but we always try to do something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and on the other end, I think there is also like a almost an inflated number because there have been several games that have like kind of come in and expected big buyout spots, and like those when those numbers get thrown around, everything inflates,
Mm-hmm.
to like numbers for individual contracts or for teams. So I think it's really weird because um, I think it comes down to people still trying to figure out really where esports fits within the entertainment space, where where is it really going to land as far as like viewership numbers. We still continue to see things rise, but like where that money is coming in, where like sponsors are able to really find return on their investments, all of those things are still being figured out and solidified. And because of that, I would say that's what that or why that weirdness exists, and it's kind of all over the board. I
Yeah.
think as we're still sorting it out, it's still the Wild West out there, and it's kind of been that way for a while.
It has been for a long time. I remember maybe 8, 10 years ago, might even be longer than that. They had this council where people were meeting to talk about it, and I feel like it
Hmm.
happened once and then it never really happened again. I don't know. Maybe I just stopped paying attention, but I remember. I think it was on like PAX East or something like that. They had this council that they were streaming as people talk about the gaming industry. But
Hmm.
um, sorry, I digress a little bit.
It's okay.
I'm going to tie back in what you just said about kind of your experience,
Hmm.
and not to beat a dead horse. What I'm really hoping to do is help provide roadmaps a little bit for people that want to get into the industry. So
Hmm.
talking about that weirdness, talking about there's this like hyperinflation of what's happening, plus that there's this expectation that you should work for free. What would your advice be to yourself when you were starting? Like, think about if you could be where you're at now. Think about 10 years ago, or wherever, when you started. What advice would you
Hmm.
give yourself about working for free, putting in just the grind, do free work? What would that look like?
I think one thing that I'm always really, really grateful about is that I had people who were helping to support me while I got into gaming, so I had a little bit of like wiggle room. Had
Mm,
I not had that, I think I would have wanted to make sure that I knew that, um, you know, uh, you've got to have realistic expectations at the same time as you're, working for stuff. I think some of the some of the best commentators at times that I've been able to work with, um, are people who have like stable jobs. And not to say that you can't rely on being an esports talent as a full time job. It definitely is feasible, but it's the kind of stress that every contractor I think goes through until they really feel like they've kind of hit a spot where they're like stable if something should happen, like I think especially in the COVID landscape, that's especially important because with events canceling, talent have lost gigs.
yeah.
So while I was trying to put in the grind and casting community events, I think the advice I would have had is, just make sure that I'm doing something else at the same time to support myself while I'm putting that grind in, and not like completely hoping to um, be able to switch over and do it full time. That being said, I know I'm extremely lucky in that I didn't have to worry about that, and I know that's not the case with everybody else. But that's some of the advice I'd give, as well as make sure I know that everybody, um, it's a small scene, and everybody's trying to help out everybody for the most part. So you never know, like when someone else that you meet is going to have an opportunity that they think you'd be a great fit for, or vice versa, where um, you know, find out an opportunity that a friend would be a good fit for. Like when I was casting Heroes, there was an observer spot that was open, and I knew somebody who had been trying to be a pro player, and he ended up being the main observer for HGC. So, um, you never know where those connections are going to happen. So, treat everybody as a friend is the other advice.
I've been really shocked at how nice I guess people have been in the industry, because I feel like it's such a cutthroat space. Like there's
Hmm.
limited options, there's limited opportunities, but everyone has been so nice. I'm going to give a little shout out to a friend of mine. I don't know if you know Alex Golden Boy, FTW Mendez, if you ever heard
Of
of him.
course. Yeah.
So
He's wonderful.
dude, he's the nicest guy
He
in the
is.
world. And he, like, time after time after time, has been so kind to me, and I'm a nobody.
Hmm.
And I told him, I was like, if we're ever in the same city, I'm buying you dinner. I told him this probably like 6 years ago. So he still has a dinner coming to him. And I have been really blown away, though, by people in the space and in the community. And I want to highlight that, because for me coming in, I was so scared to reach out to people. I was so scared to like inconvenience somebody, or I was thinking that I was just another person asking. Now, don't get me wrong, there can be those people who are just another person asking, but at the same time, people aren't as scary as I thought they would be.
Yeah, I think that probably goes for like most things. And
It's probably true, yeah.
but like I don't know, we being on the internet, I think we deal with a wide array, of personalities and maybe moods as well. But I think in general that's been my experience as well.
Yeah, the first game I ever casted was Tribes. I don't know if you've ever played Tribes or seen
Nope.
Tribes. It's this really, really fast first person shooter. And the reason I got that opportunity is I made this really crappy Diablo 3 video, because Diablo 3 was talking about having PvP. So I did this random PvP shoutcasting thing. Some random guy saw it, said, "Hey, I'm casting Tribes. Do you want to join me tonight?" And I was like, "I don't ever even heard this game." He's like, "It's cool. Download it. I got it. Like, I'll carry you." He's like, "Just be like my side commentary guy." I was like, "Okay." And told all my friends, and I had so much fun. And it was like, because that guy did that, I was able to get these experiences that like I'll remember for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a small world out there, which is why I think, you know, at this some of the people sharing their experiences, it's been really hard, and I think it's been extra hard because everyone knows everybody, so people are finding out things that they didn't know and they wish they knew about people they knew or their friends or acquaintances. And it is very much a small world, so anyone looking to enter into the space, there might be some scenes here and there there is more of the competition that you were talking about, especially I think at like right below or around the like level of hitting pro commentary. It's pretty cutthroat. I can't speak to what the experience is like for pro players. I'm sure around that level it's the same, just because you're so close. But it can be that way in commentary. It was kind of that way in Heroes commentary at times. And I think it really takes, I don't know. I think those people eventually get weeded out. People don't want to work with people like that, and eventually you get to a point where collaboration between everybody, everyone recognizes that it's necessary to produce the best shows. And so I feel like that happens in a lot of areas of gaming and esports.
And if there's beef between commentators, it can be pretty obvious. And I
Yes.
don't think producers want that. They
Yeah.
want a team. I mean, don't get me wrong, like the arguing, like the fighting or the I think this. Well, I think this. Like some of that's okay. You can
Debating.
have different views, but if you like cannot stand the guy across from you, they don't
Mhm.
want that because that just creates a lot of hostility, and then Twitter blows up, and then there's a whole bunch of mud smeared across. Whoever it is, we'll just use Blizzard because they're big. And like Blizzard doesn't want that. They're like, oh, okay, calm down. We need to figure this out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it definitely is almost like a, I don't know, for lack of a better term, like a time bomb, right? Where you can notice it on broadcast. Like people can notice that when the chemistry isn't there, when people hate each other. Although I think there's some very good actors out there because I've heard stories of like movies where the lead actors hated each other and they
Yeah.
made it work. So I guess you never know, but I would think when you especially spend that much time, because tournaments and some esports broadcasts are really long. Like I feel like it'd be really hard to hide. I know it would be for me.
Oh, absolutely. And especially when you're on hour 16, game
Yep.
35, and you're tired and your filter's like waning, it
Yeah.
comes out.
Yes, it does.
um, if this is okay, I'm going to transition to a little bit. We talked about YouTube, talked about your start. I want to talk about now, because we've talked about commentating so long. That was actually, you did that for a while. I think feel like that was like a
Mhm.
good chunk of your time. Tell us a little bit about how you landed your first like full hey, I'm a commentator doing this professionally. What was that like, and what were the steps that it took to get there?
It's interesting. I often thought about the big break.
Mm,
When you're trying to get into
that's a great way of
in
putting
this
that. I'm
case.
stealing that, by the way, for
Oh, go
future
ahead.
episodes.
Yeah, yeah, please. There you go. I'll just take 10% of the royalties.
Sounds good.
um, yeah, like, when you're trying to get into esports, you're looking for the big break, but I will say that it felt at the time like a moving target. Like, the first gig I got was a studio show for Blizzard. It was at ESL Studio. There was some the like kind of predominant at the time heroes casters, and then they had one guy who is one of my friends. He casts StarCraft, but I think they were looking for a little bit more endemic like heroes people. So I was brought in, um, and I remember being so nervous. My stomach was a wreck. I was very nervous. I was so nervous. And I was so nervous that I said the word indeed like 20 times my first broadcast.
The repeat
I
words.
never,
I totally know what
yep,
you're talking about.
the crutch phrases. Why do you do this?
Yeah.
I have never said indeed in my life until that broadcast. And then one person said it, and suddenly it was apparently the only word in my vocabulary.
You go.
But someone told me just to take it and run with it. So the next day I dropped like the biggest indeed of my life. I was like, indeed it was, and then it became like one of my Twitch emotes, and it was a whole thing.
I love that.
So yeah, so anxiety I think is the best way to describe the first broadcast. You get really nervous because you want to do a really good job, and then it kind of transitions into like being anxious about losing what you have. And especially as heroes, its esport continued to go through different iterations. Um, it was a lot of fear of losing my place in its history, and I wouldn't say that I ever felt like I'd made it until maybe like midway through the first season of HGC, which feels so late when you look back. Like I casted both Heroes of the Dorm on ESPN. I casted in Korea, the birthplace of esports. All of these different places, but it kept feeling like just so much worry about losing what I had, or like making sure that I was getting to do the next thing, that I never would ever felt like I had made it until I guess one day I woke up and I was like, I guess I'm a caster now. I don't know.
It just kind of hit you. I was talking to a friend of mine who big gamer but not into esports at all. Like he just loves playing video games.
Mhm.
And I also got to go to Korea with a company called WebZen, and so
Mhm.
we did some online stuff for them. We being me and a friend,
Yeah.
and they liked what we did, and they said, "Do any of you have a passport? We're bringing you out." And I was the only one with a passport, so I got super lucky.
Oh my gosh.
And so I got to go out for this tournament and got to do some commentary for the G Star convention.
Okay.
And I got back from that trip, and I was talking to my buddy about it. And I was like kind of sad because another thing I had going on completely dive bombed, and I was like, "Oh, that was my shot," and I didn't make it. He was like, "Dude, you got a free trip to Korea, and you got to go to Vegas for free for this. You've made it farther than most. Like, what are you
Mm-hmm.
talking about?" And for me, that was my moment where I was like, you know what? Yeah, if this goes nowhere, I still had some really cool experiences.
Yeah, all that perspective. And I'm sure if I had been like, when am I gonna make it to any of my friends, they would have been like, what are you talking about? What are you doing right now? The
Yeah,
exact same way.
yeah, because I love that you talked about that though, because I'm sure there was a lot of people looking at, like, literally looking at you on ESPN or wherever you were, like, wow, she made it. I can't wait till I get to that moment, or I can't wait. But to you, that was Tuesday, and you're kind of like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen tomorrow,
Yeah.
because like you're still feeling that tension of, is this going to last? Because unfortunately, the story for Heroes of the Storm is that they canceled. They, like, Blizzard completely stopped their esports stuff. I do understand now it's starting to come back a little bit, but I don't think it's Blizzard sponsored, if I'm not mistaken.
No, we're doing a lot of stuff, and then there's a lot of really awesome community like organizations doing stuff as well. But I think that's why when you ask me for my advice to myself, and I'm like, be realistic with yourself, like it sounds like such a downer. It's not like a, you can do anything if you work hard enough. Like that's also true, I also believe that. But because I've had the experience of an esport just ripping the rug out from so many people that I loved, like I was very lucky. I had already taken the job with Psionics at that point. But so many of my friends, so many of the people that I've been talking about and seeing in events for years, suddenly out of nowhere just didn't have a job. And now seeing that kind of again with COVID, it's very weird. Like I love commentary, I love talent work, but it's really hard for me to see longevity in that as a career right now, in esports. And I think one of the big issues for that is that it's hard for people to see the the experience that one gets in one game, like commentating one game, doesn't necessarily translate to other
Mm-hmm.
games or even to other professions. That was one thing that I was really worried about when I was looking for a job past commentating, and was very grateful to Psionics for recognizing that experience. But I know, it's almost like once you've commentated for a while, you're kind of like, I'm going to take whatever I can get because I don't know when the next time it'll be that somebody recognizes where this experience can go. Like, um, my co-caster, Dreadnought, he, when HGC was pulled out, really had to like fight for people to recognize that he could commentate other genres of games. He eventually went on to cast like the grand finals of one of the best Apex Legends events, right? Like, the guy can analyze anything. But it's weird that more people don't recognize that those skills that you learn can translate. It's the prep work. It's
Yep.
the analyzing the game, and it's the storytelling and the voice, the vocal control that you do. Those things carry through games, and people don't always recognize that.
You have no idea how excited I am that you talked about the storytelling. I have been
Yeah.
talking about this for like 8 years, and people will not listen to me. So every time I ever do a shoutcast, I never put my camera on, and people get really mad. And they're like, "Why aren't
Mm.
your camera?" I'm like, "Because I'm not the story.
Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt the story. The players are the story. The game is the story. Why would I put my face in front of that?" And people are
Yeah.
like, "No, we're here to see you." And I'm like, "No, you think you're here to see me, but you're here because I'm telling a story about it." At the time it was like Shoot Mania or Tribes, or it's like all these like
Yeah.
random first person shooter games. And sorry, I'll get off my soapbox here in a second.
No, no.
Until we do a
Preach.
really good job of tracking statistics, one of the things I love that Owl's doing,
Mhm.
we talk about matchups, people's experience of playing other players, other teams, etc. that story is so hard to come up with, the long story. So I feel like
Hmm.
we really have to focus on this like short 30-minute window story. And I can't wait till esports starts having like a decade long story or
Hmm.
something like that. And that's what I'm excited for.
Yeah, legacies.
Mm-hmm.
Those that that's incredible because that's what that's what people love about their sports teams
Exactly.
that they adore. Is they won the Super Bowl in 80 something, and they
Exactly.
haven't
Yep.
won since then, right? Like that's
Yep.
insane. And I can't wait for that point too. I think that's one thing that I really loved about Rocket League is even like when I entered the scene, and because they always had two world championships a year, um, they already had a ton of history. And while that was difficult to pick up initially, just like jumping into a scene with so much history, it's really cool now because you can look all the way back to the game before Rocket League SARP, and just see like these old legends continuing to try to like hang in with all of these like new incredible mechanical gods is
Yes.
like a story that's lasted for seasons and seasons, and that is awesome.
Yep. And now, sorry to derail again, but like I think I just read Squishy Muffins. I don't follow Rocket League super big. I used to play. I don't really follow. Like Squishy Muffins just changed teams, and like
Yep.
that made like a big splash on my YouTube. All these recommended videos. I was like, what the heck? I haven't watched a Rocket League video in like 2 years.
Yeah.
And so it's like these stories are so imperative, and the caster's job is to let people know about those stories, and I love that.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that's one thing that a lot of like newer commentators don't recognize, is a lot of what they do is they want to show how much they know about the game. And that makes sense. You're trying to prove yourself, right? You're trying to prove that you belong there, and a lot of that is knowledge based.
Hmm.
But what they don't recognize, and what I think once they've been in for a bit and they start to see, is that it's really the ability to weave those stories, to tell them to know the history and be involved in the history is so huge, and then being able to just craft the story even of an individual tournament, the story of the underdogs, the team that drops to the losers bracket the very first round and makes it all the way back up, right? The way that you're able to tell those stories is definitely a great skill that picks up and does transcend past just one game or even one genre of a game.
I watched like a half-hour video. Like I said, I haven't watched a lot of Rocket League. I haven't really been following it, but I heard about this story. So those of you who don't know about Rocket League, there is the you're gonna have to help me with some of these phrases. I think it's the RLCS is like
Hmm.
the premier, and
Yep.
then there's the RLRS. I think is
Yep.
what it
The
is. It's
rival
underneath.
series.
So that's
Hmm.
kind of like your amateur. I say like they're better than amateur, but like they're the if you're familiar with soccer, they can get relegated up or down into these two chunks of teams, and a team came up and then won the whole thing. And I cannot remember that they weren't even sponsored. Like they had no sponsor. They were just like three dudes, and then they got a whole bunch. And I remember watching this video like this is the best story I've ever heard in my life. This is so cool.
Yeah,
And
it's
I
very
think it was
cool
the
to
NA
be
one.
able. I'm trying to think of which team you're referencing. Was it like old, like really long time ago, or?
I want to say this was probably like I said, it's been probably at least a year since I've watched Rocket League stuff. But I
Okay.
remember I hadn't been following Rocket League for a long time, saw this video, and I was like, this is the coolest story in the world. Like, who would not love listening to this story?
There's definitely been some really cool rival series to make it to Worlds in their first season, which is a huge task to be able to like learn to hang in with what is very clearly a brand new set of like skill set of players. Like the second you make it an RLCS, everyone plays faster, everyone's smarter, everyone
Mm-hmm.
is more conservative with like, they're perfecting how much boost they use, right?
Yep.
Like everyone, there's very little mistakes, and so to be able to come in and immediately make it to Worlds or like do well at Worlds is a huge thing. Like that's something that Pittsburgh Knights did. Their first. Oh, I know who it was. It was the Peeps.
Yes, the Peeps.
They made the
Yes.
rival series, so they didn't.
Yes.
So they won a dream hack, which was with a
Oh,
bunch
that's
of
what it was. They
RLCS
won a dream
teams.
hack. Yes, you're
Yeah,
right. I'm sorry.
but no, no. But you're right. The Peeps is one of the best stories
Oh,
still to this day in Rocket League.
like
They
I would
are
go back and watch that video
so
if I could
cool.
find it.
You can go back and watch that DreamHack too. They were amazing. They beat the the world champions who had just won like a couple months before. Then they beat the team that was second place. Like they seriously just beat like everybody that nobody expected.
It
It
it's
was
so cool. People need to look that up if they haven't. Like that was
yeah,
it's a great story.
it is. It is very good.
So I want to segue, but kind of on the same topic, because one of the things that I've always wanted to learn more about, and I never really had someone to ask, but I also think it's important for somebody coming up in the commentating scene, is I don't even know if these are the terms that they use. I remember hearing these terms when I was into sports, but there's like
Hmm.
the color commentator, there's the analyst, there's like kind of these
Sure.
different hats that you could say different commentators have, the play-by-play
Yeah.
guy, the what do you see being the different styles, and what do you see being the more desired styles?
So it's completely dependent on what develops in the scene as well as the kind of game that you're commentating. So the more traditional is to have the roles of play-by-play and color commentator. Um, that is what you see generally in like Rocket League, especially maybe not quite as recent, but further back because sometimes even they have an adjusted style that's more what they call hybrid. But generally, what that means is that the play-by-play is going to take more of the commentary, and then your color commentators like kind of coming in when they notice maybe a pattern developing, something to point out that you wouldn't have noticed on first glance, something to keep in mind that could play into the story or could back up the story of what the play-by-play color or play-by-play is telling. Um, so you've kind of got that. When we casted heroes, we were completely a mix because fights could break out at any time. You
Right.
had to be able to do both. So you had to be very smart and understanding about the talents, the skills, how things were going to mash up together. But you also had to be able to carry a fight. Otherwise, it was very difficult um, to cast with somebody if they were just one role focused. You could like tend toward like I'm generally play by play, but you could not be 100%. Um, so I think every game is a mix somewhere on like the spectrum between those two. Um, I You can even look into I don't know if they're still doing this, but like League of Legends, when they were doing all LAN events, they tri casted, and I think somebody was a little more like story based. Somebody like did the hype fights, and then someone else was the pure analysis like after a fight, right?
Mm,
Or like
maybe like the
analytical
breakdown
points
of
thrown
the
in.
of something.
Of replays too, because
Yep.
they would have replays. But that would be TriCasting would be extremely difficult online because you can't like everything. There's a lot of unspoken language, like you're using
Mm-hmm.
body language when you're casting together that just doesn't exist when you're
Yep.
casting online. In addition to commentary, though, there's other roles too. Like there are straight analysts that are on like if you watch like OWL, you've got like a completely different like analyst desk where you've got
Mm-hmm.
analysts who they're purely their job is to kind of break down the stats, the important plays, be able to tell you like what trends people are doing or in drafting or anything like that. And then you've got also desk hosts that will lead the desks, make sure that the conversation continues to flow, make sure you're stepping through all your graphics that you need to step through. Um, and you might even have a stage host when you get to a live event. So and interviewers and all of that. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of different talent roles that you can look to get into if you're interested in being an esports and talent role.
How would you um, suggest or encourage somebody to get into those different roles, or is there one that you would say tends to get neglected, so it might be easier to get into, or is there one that maybe you think is helps set you up best for then future opportunities?
I will say I think good desk hosts are very difficult to come by. You your whole job is to make it seem like everything is as planned. So like any sort of issues, all fine, all part of the plan. We're just going to sit we're having such a good discussion. We've got to keep this going, right? Like
Yep.
yeah, there's an issue, but like we have to talk about this, you know? Like that's your whole job, is to just make it seem like part of the plan. I think Caleres is very good at that if you ever watch him desk host. Um, so I think that is, it definitely opens up your ability to go between games as well. Like, I will say hosting roles typically, I think people are a little more open to seeing the benefit of people working cross games, whereas commentating is by far requires you to know the game the best, especially if you're even further in, like an analyst, color commentator. But you're also getting to talk at the best parts of the game too. Like that's definitely the big benefit. But it does kind of pigeonhole you, I think, especially in your first game. As you open that up, I think it gets a bit easier and easier. Especially even I think right now within shooters, like people can kind of go between like CS:GO and Valorant, right? Like people can see the skills between both as long as you know the game.
Right.
But I seem to see like hosting, if you're strictly wanting to go for something where you can like work cross games and maybe be able to pick up jobs, desk hosting. But with that in mind, you really have to be able to like hear what people are telling you on comms. You're trying to direct the conversation.
Yes.
You want to be listening to them so that you know how to like be like, I see what you're saying here. It looks like maybe you disagree with that though, looking at your face, right? Like you've got to be able to keep a lot going all at the same time
While having a producer in your ear.
while having a producer in your ear.
Yeah, that was
sometimes in another language too. Like that happens to you when you
Yeah.
work, and internationally it does happen.
When I went to South Korea, my first the first thing they did, they said we're gonna dual cast this into English and in Korean. We're just gonna do it at the same time, and I was like, oh, okay. So we're doing it. They said, hey, our feedback is people can't hear either, so we're gonna trade. So I literally was casting to my interpreter, who would say it to the person in Korean, and then they would pass it back to me, to my interpreter, to me, and then I would pick up, and we were having a conversation through an interpreter while doing it. It was crazy.
Wait, in the middle of the game?
Yes.
Oh my god, I've never heard anything like that in my life. That is crazy.
Yeah, it was really wild. It actually went really well. I was really impressed. Like the interpreter, obviously, I think carried all of it.
Yes.
But
yes.
and
that
then,
is an unspoken role too. Yeah, translating in esports for sure. Yes.
honestly, if I could go back and give myself like advice, I would say learn some languages. I would aim at Korean, Mandarin probably right now. I feel like Japanese is really big, but I don't see a lot of Japanese teams going outside of Japan. I may be wrong.
I think it just depends on
the game.
Yeah,
Yep.
the game.
And then there's other Southeast Asian countries. I'm trying to think, like the stuff I went to. I think there was some Taiwanese teams. I think that's getting big with like League. And if you could pick up some Southeast Asian language, like I feel like you could land a interpreting job fairly easy in esports. I don't know if that's true, but that's what I tell myself.
I think there's always a need for good translators in esports too, because I think one of the hardest things that I've ever experienced translators struggle with is like game terms. Like you never know when someone's going to jump into like a character name, like a hero name, and heroes sometimes would throw people off. Abilities
Right.
would also throw people off, because it's like, do you translate that? Do you just use it? Like, I don't even know where to begin with that. But we worked with some phenomenal translators who knew what to do about those. Along similar lines, I think a talent role that maybe people don't look at as like traditional talent, but I think is enough to consider talent within like a talent group, is an observer. Observers are hugely important to esports productions. Sometimes maybe not looked at, like I said, as like traditional talent, but I really feel like they should be treated that way, because they're absolutely integral. They have to be creative in the same ways. They're also part of the storytelling process.
I don't know if this is what you mean, so I want to ask and get some clarity. When you say the observer, are you talking about the person directing the camera, basically? I remember when I was in Korea doing that thing. It was a first-person shooter. It was kind of like a Counter-Strike clone, but it had some other stuff to it. Yeah. And but a lot of the same terminology. And I remember it was one of the developers was being our camera guy, and he was in this first person, and they were going into this main choke area, and he detached, went up, and like swung. And I like while casting, I was like, "Whoa, this shot is amazing!" Like in my head, and I remember thinking, like, "This is people need to practice this."
Mhm. Yeah. I can remember there was like a really cool shot in a Heroes tournament. It was the one in Vegas, the America's Championship, where someone void prisoned a leaping Sonya. It was, I think Miwa was casting or was observing then, and it was like such a cool shot. I was just like, Miwa, you're a god! Like it was so cool. And then like watching the team that we have at Wisdom who observes our Valorant fight nights, they're amazing. It takes three of them to like make sure to observe it because two are actually running the cameras and then one is kind of helping to direct, and they set up some really cool shots where like they'll be following somebody who's about to get like sniped in a corner, so then they'll like turn to the person who has the sight line to like catch them, right? Like
Yeah.
it's such a cool like trade and skill that like I feel like is so undervalued.
Oh, super. I feel like it is super undervalued, and those people need way more shout outs because I know when I solo cast, because like I've said, like, I haven't had a whole lot of experience in the industry. A lot of the stuff I do is just games that I like, and there's a small
Yeah.
scene. So I'm the camera guy, I'm the, like the color, I'm the analyst, I'm the everything. And there's been so many times where I forget to do the camera because I'm into like what's happening,
Yeah.
and oh, just having a good observer is awesome.
Yeah, it's almost like they feel like video editors to me where no one says anything if it's good observing, but the second that observing's bad is that's all they talk about the
Right.
whole time. I think video editing is much the same.
Yeah.
Unsung heroes for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, post production. I mean, that's a whole nother skill set we could talk about too,
Oh yeah.
of being able to get into.
Mhm.
Okay, I told you I wanted to respect your time. I know we have. I said I was going to try to aim for now. I know you have a little bit more time. I
Mhm.
do though want to quickly get to, really quickly, what you did at Psionics, and then
Sure.
talk about what you're doing currently a little bit more, if that's okay.
Absolutely. So when I worked for Psionics, they brought me on to help. Um, my official title was broadcast specialist, and that kind of encompassed two different um, sets of like roles, I guess, or two different roles. One thing I did was I would manage all of our talent. Rocket League has a phenomenal group of talent. I love those guys. They're amazing. Got to work with Golden Boy at one event too, which was super special. I
Nicest
love
guy in
him.
esports.
He's very kind and very talented too.
He is.
Um, and so I managed them. I did a little bit of coaching as well. So I would,
Sorry, before you
just
continue, coaching teams or were you
oh
coaching
no,
talent?
talent coaching.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. So I would help like help them set goals for what
Hmm.
they wanted to work on throughout a season, and then I would help gather clips and kind of talk through how to maybe get to where they wanted with their goals, as well as being able to just kind of like I think help psionics see and understand things that would happen from a talent's point of view, because I've been a talent too, like,
Oh,
oh,
I love that.
you're thank you. And I think it's awesome that psionics valued that and
Yeah.
valued again my experience as a commentator in that way. I think it really helped to bridge good like help good make good relationships between the talent and psionics as well, at
Yeah.
least I like to think so. The other thing I did was I would be kind of that same bridge between who ran our official productions and psionics. So it was kind of like making sure that things were to the quality that we needed, and helping to provide information, help craft stories, like in the pre-show. Those are all kinds of the things that I would do while I was at psionics.
Hmm.
um, Now at Wisdom, I am the brand manager, and um, specifically, I work on all of our Riot game content and then all of
Okay.
our Rocket League content, so Gold Rush. I manage all of our content coordinators, who are people who, in some way, shape, or form, are a member of the scenes that they're advising on content. So, they might come up with, hey, I want to do this fight night, or I want to do this YouTube series. and it's about like helping to get the graphics, or like any sort of graphical content that they need for that. I also manage our creative team in the process of that. So I'm kind of the go-between there. I also help with, like making sure that they're adhering to budgets, and just generally trying to help manage them so that they can in turn better manage their teams of script writers, video editors, etc.
I don't mean to
Go ahead.
minimize. It sounds like I mean you're really functioning as a project manager,
Hmm.
and specifically within esports. I'm saying this to kind of help people connect the dots of like some of what the
Sure.
stuff they've done,
Yeah.
and so you're. It sounds like you're helping bridge from I guess what you call like a third party vendor or something like that, like somebody to your company, what you're trying to
Hmm.
accomplish, and you're
Yeah.
that go between for the two. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say that I'm like the head project manager, and
Yeah.
that the content coordinators beneath me project manage the actual, shows
Okay.
and YouTube series that we would do. But Wisdom has pretty far-reaching, I think, scope and goals that they have. There's a digital team that I think, consults with different companies, is able to consult and help with, trying to enter the gaming space. Um, there we've got like content and shows in the media department, which I'm a part of, that span past, those two areas that I work on. Specifically, we still do Heroes of the Storm content, and we've got Warcraft 3 content as well. And then my company owner also acquired Alpine Esports, and they have recently acquired a Rocket League professional team. So
Oh, cool.
they'll be competing in the upcoming RLCSX. So,
Oh, an
um,
RLCS team. Oh,
yeah,
wow.
yeah, they're well, kind of everybody is now because they've changed the format a
Oh,
bit,
they have.
but
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
hmm
But
yeah, it's very recently announced. But yeah, they're a phenomenal team. I'm super excited to get to see them compete, and
yep.
hopefully get to see them grow and all of that. But yeah, we're trying to do a lot of awesome stuff. Hopefully someday in the future, since we did acquire Gold Rush, which is a community Rocket League. Basically, they made community Rocket League tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
They did them on land, so our hope is that someday post COVID we'll be able to do the same, because I miss LAN events. It'd be really fun to go back to them.
Oh, there. It's just a different type of energy. If you guys haven't been to a LAN event, it is
Hmm.
really really cool. I I used to be really into sports. I'm not now, but I like LAN events more than I like sport events.
I would agree. I definitely agree. I think because everyone is like so passionate about their game. Like if they're there, especially for like a 3 day, like I'm here for the 16-hour days. Let's go. Like they're so crazy passionate.
Yep.
And I absolutely feel that way about, I feel like I was very lucky because commentating in Here's the Storm, that's an extremely passionate and loving community. And then Rocket League is the same way. I loved going to all the Rocket League lands. I was always like, I gotta work them once I was working for Psionics, because they're so much fun. I would definitely recommend to anybody to go check one out.
If I could, I think that would be like the coolest job for me. Is just traveling to different lands and different things and doing customer service, because I actually like genuinely
Hmm.
really love customer service, and so to be able to
Really?
do it in that venue would be awesome for me.
Hmm.
And oh, that'd be like the coolest thing in the world. I would love that. So
I don't
I
know about the
envy you.
customer service side. Maybe that's just me, but
Oh, I
uh,
love the client facing, like making a kid's day. And yeah, I
oh.
like that.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Yeah, it would be very fun. I think there's got to be like a con reviewer, right? Like I think that'd be pretty dope if I could just go and just be like, I'm here to experience the con so that I can review it.
What is
That'd
the
be pretty
what is the oh, like a secret shopper? You could like secret shopper
dope.
the different
Convention.
convention. Yeah, and
I got secret shopped one time when I was working my college job, and it did not go well.
oof.
Yeah.
Well, now you got to get paid back to the conventions and your secret. That's what you need to start. You start a little side gig, and people can rate it. Like let vendors rate it. Let
This is
the people
genius.
who go. I don't know. Maybe
We
it'll.
gotta patent this.
Yeah. So one of the things that I want to do with this podcast
Hmm.
is I want to give my guest the last word. So I know I didn't prepare you for this. I
Nope.
forgot to do this. So whether that be, you want to give shout outs, whether that be like, hey, this is what we're doing at Wisdom, go to this website, go check, like, whatever it is. I
Mhm.
don't care. I mean, I do care a little bit, like, don't be a racist jerk or like say
Don't worry.
something like that. But, promote away. Um, so I'm going to do a quick wrap up and then
Sure.
leave it to you to get the last word, and then I'll stop recording.
Okay.
So, all of you who've tuned in, I appreciate it. The goal for this is to highlight a bunch of different esports opportunities that are out there, hear people's stories, hopefully give you an opportunity to learn. I am Adam Indra Dandar. Jaycie, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for dropping your wisdom on us. And now the end of the show is yours.
Well, thank you. First, thank you, Adam, for having me. Um, I guess the two things I would want to do is one, just thank all of my fans and my friends who have always supported me. They don't get to see me do much anymore behind the camera like this, so thank you for giving me time to talk and wanting to hear what I want to say, Adam. And thank you to all of my friends and my fans, especially my best friend Adam. He is very supportive, and I super appreciate that. And my boyfriend Wade. The other thing that I would just want to say is, it's been a very tough time in gaming and esports from COVID and from the all of the people coming forward with their stories, the super brave people who are doing that. And I just want to support them. Please continue to support their stories. Please continue to support, all the movements that you agree with. I agree with Black Lives Matter, and I would just hope that you would continue to try to elevate the stories of those who whose stories need to be heard. So please continue to do that. Please continue to wash your hands and wear a mask. And thank you, everybody. Thank you, Adam. And have a good evening or day or whenever you watch this.